After Christmas, my dad said I should pay because I don't have kids. So I ended every payment, cut the cards holding them together, and watched their happy home fall apart until nothing was left. I was 32, and for the longest time, I thought that carrying the weight of responsibility on my shoulders was something noble. I believed that if I worked hard, saved my money, paid my bills on time, and always showed up when my family needed me, then they would respect me. I thought my father would look at me with pride, my sister would be grateful, and maybe even the rest of the family would acknowledge me as the steady, reliable one. But the truth hit me like a stone that cold morning, 2 days after Christmas, when I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a sense of routine comfort. I logged into my online banking, expecting the same old numbers, the same predictable balances, the same quiet peace. Instead, my jaw dropped. There it was, a charge that made my blood run cold. $2,300. Not to groceries, not to bills, not to anything responsible. It was to premium electronics and gaming. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, maybe fraud. My mind immediately started racing through scenarios. Some hacker, some stranger across the world using my card information. That had to be it. But when I clicked on the details, my hands began to tremble. The billing address didn't belong to a thief across the globe. It belonged to my father, my childhood home, the same place I had laughed and celebrated holidays as a boy. That familiar address burned into my eyes, mocking me with its betrayal. I remembered gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white as I drove over there. Every mile felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was some logical explanation. But when I opened the front door and walked inside, my heart sank completely. The scene in front of me was a picture that told me everything without a single word. My nephew sat in a brand new leather gaming chair, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars, maybe even more. His eyes were glued to a shiny, brand new PlayStation setup that glowed with bright lights. A massive 65-inch television mounted on the wall still had the price sticker half sticking out from the side, almost like it was mocking me for ever believing this family wouldn't use me. I stood there frozen for a moment, my breath caught in my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. My father looked up from his newspaper, and for just a brief second, I saw it, the flicker of guilt. But just as quickly, his expression shifted into something hard, almost defiant. He set down his paper and looked me straight in the eye. And what he said next shattered something inside of me. With a grin that felt like a knife, he declared, "Since you don't have kids, you should help those who do." He said it like it was the most logical thing in the world, as if stealing from his own son was just a matter of simple family math. I can't explain the exact feeling that ripped through me in that moment. It was like a combination of betrayal, shock, and rage twisting together in my chest. This was the man who had raised me to believe in honesty, who once lectured me for taking a candy bar when I was 8 years old, who made me march back into a store to return it because, as he said, "We don't take what doesn't belong to us." And yet here he was, looking me dead in the eye, telling me that stealing from me was not only acceptable but expected. Before I could even respond, my sister walked out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. The expression on her face told me everything. She already knew. She had been part of this. And then she started talking. She spoke about how hard life had been since her divorce, how money was tight, how her son deserved nice things for Christmas just like other kids. She framed it like a noble sacrifice, as if draining my bank account without my knowledge was a selfless act for her child. As her words spilled out, I looked around the room again and realized it wasn't just the gaming setup. There were shopping bags by the door, designer clothes laid out on the couch, and even a brand new tablet still in its packaging on the coffee table. This was not a single purchase. This was a full-blown shopping spree. And then the final blow came. My father leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and told me that I was being selfish. He said that because I had a good job, no wife, no kids, and plenty of disposable income, I should naturally be the one to help carry the burden. He made it sound as if I was a bad son for not wanting to be robbed. His words echoed in my head, and before I knew it, I let out a sharp, almost bitter laugh. Surprised even me, because at that moment, the absurdity of it all was almost too much. They had stolen from me, sat surrounded by their ill-gotten gains, and still had the nerve to call me selfish. That was when I looked at them both and said calmly, "Great, then you'll love what comes next." The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing so fast that I could hardly focus on the road. But strangely enough, for the first time in hours, I felt a cold, steely sense of clarity. If they wanted to treat me like a bank, then they were about to learn what happened when the bank closed its doors. I got home, sat at my kitchen table, and spread out every financial document I could find. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light as I began piecing everything together. And what I found made my stomach turn even more. Over the past 3 years, I had slowly been absorbed into their financial web without even realizing it. Started small, almost innocent. When my father retired early because of health problems, I helped with a few bills. It was supposed to be temporary, but temporary turned into permanent. Soon, I was covering his mortgage payments, car insurance, health insurance, and even the family cell phone plan. My sister had been added to my credit cards for emergencies, but clearly, her definition of emergency included lavish Christmas sprees. Little by little, my income had been integrated into their lifestyle until I was no longer a helpful son. I was their silent provider. And then came the most infuriating discovery. My father had somehow managed to forge my name as a co-signer on a personal loan. The bank had approved it, and that loan had funded my sister's car down payment 6 months ago. I could feel my face burning as I realized the full scope of their deception. They had not just crossed a line. They had built an entire house on the other side of it. By midnight, I had a full plan. Every automatic payment, every shared account, every link between my money and their lives would be cut off. They wanted me to be their ATM. Well, ATMs could be shut down. That night, I called my credit card company and reported the fraudulent charges. New cards were rushed to me. I called the bank about the forged loan documents, and to my surprise, the representative was actually helpful once I explained the situation. I went through utilities, cable, internet, even security systems. One by one, I canceled my authorization and severed the connection. The mortgage was trickier, but I stopped the automatic payments and filed a fraud complaint with the bank regarding the loan. By 3 in the morning, I was exhausted. My fingers ached from typing, my eyes burned from the computer screen, but every account was secure, every link broken. I even changed every password and security question, leaving nothing for them to exploit again. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange, almost foreign feeling relief. I fell asleep around 4 in the morning, but at 6:47 my phone started ringing. My father's number. I let it go to voicemail, then my sister, then him again. By 7:30, I had 12 missed calls. I made my coffee, opened the voicemails, and watched the sunrise. The progression was almost amusing. First, my father sounded confused, then annoyed, then panicked. The power was out. The mortgage was flagged. The credit cards declined. By the time my sister left her message, she was practically screaming. Their entire world was already starting to fall apart. As the days passed, the silence between us became louder than any words that could have been spoken. I did not call them, and they did not call me. Yet, I could sense their lives beginning to tremble like a tower built of fragile cards slowly losing balance. At first, it was just little things, subtle whispers that reached me through distant relatives or mutual family friends. The mortgage payment had not been made on time. The utilities bill had been sent back with a red warning stamp. Their groceries had suddenly become more modest, and their festive cheer from Christmas seemed to fade into frustrated arguments echoing behind closed doors. And even though I was miles away from them, I could feel the cracks forming, growing wider each day. I remember sitting in my apartment one evening, looking out the window as rain danced against the glass. My phone buzzed with a message from a cousin who said, "Your dad looked stressed today. Is everything okay with him?" I smiled softly at that moment, because deep down I knew exactly what was happening. They had built their comfort on my shoulders, expecting that I would carry the weight forever without complaint. But now that I had stepped away, they had to confront their own reality. It was never about me being childless, or about them having more responsibilities. It was about control. They wanted me to play the role they had written for me, a silent provider who kept giving without ever asking anything in return. And now, stripped of that illusion, their perfect life was beginning to fall apart. Weeks turned into a month, and by then, the calls had started. At first, they were subtle. My mother's voice on the other end of the line was soft, almost gentle. She said she missed me, that things had been a little difficult, and that perhaps we could sit down and talk. But I could hear the hesitation beneath her words. I knew what she really wanted. I knew it was not about rebuilding a broken relationship, but about rebuilding their finances that were now crumbling. I told her calmly that I needed more time to think, and she hung up without pushing further. Yet that was just the beginning. Soon after, my sister called. Her voice, unlike my mother's, carried no warmth. It was demanding, edged with anger. She accused me of being selfish, of turning my back on family when they needed me the most. I let her speak until she ran out of words. Then I simply said, "For years, I gave without question. Now it is time for you to stand on your own." And before she could argue further, I ended the call. By the second month, I began to hear stories of how badly things were deteriorating. My father, once a proud man who carried himself like nothing could ever shake him, was seen at the bank, arguing with a teller about overdraft fees. Their electricity had been shut off for 2 days before they managed to scrape enough money together to turn it back on. And my sister, the very person who had laughed when my father said I should pay because I had no kids, was suddenly struggling to provide for her own children without my financial support quietly flowing in the background. The irony was almost too much to bear. For years, they had looked at me as if my life was lesser because I had no children, as if my responsibilities were nothing compared to theirs. But now, without me covering their gaps, they were the ones who could not keep up. One afternoon, I sat with a cup of coffee in my hands, and I realized something that brought both peace and sadness. It was never truly about money. It was about respect, about value, about the way they saw me. They had taken my efforts for granted because they believed I would never walk away. They believed I needed them more than they needed me. But by proving them wrong, I was watching them confront their own fragile reality. Their world was not built on stability or strength, but on my willingness to keep them afloat. And now that I had pulled away, the entire house of cards was collapsing around them, one piece at a time. And that was how everything came to an end. For years, they believed I was nothing more than a convenient wallet, someone they could push aside until bills needed to be paid. They thought I would always stand quietly in the shadows, handing over my hard-earned money without question. But this time, I took a stand. I stopped every transfer, blocked every request, and put my own life first for once. At first, they laughed, certain I would come crawling back. But weeks passed, and their perfect picture began to crack. The house they were so proud of started to slip away. The holidays they loved turned into arguments, and the lifestyle they bragged about fell apart piece by piece. I watched from a distance as the same people who once mocked me struggled to keep their world from collapsing. It wasn't easy to walk away, but it was necessary. For the first time in my life, I felt free from the burden of carrying everyone else while they gave nothing in return. Their fall apart wasn't my victory. It was simply the natural result of their own choices. And as I closed that chapter of my life, I promised myself that I would never again let anyone make me feel like I didn't matter. So, if you're reading this and you've ever been treated like a backup plan or a walking bank account, remember this: the moment you stop feeding their comfort, the moment you choose yourself, that's when the truth shows. People who truly love you will never let you carry everything alone. And those who don't, they'll watch their world fall apart the second you walk away. Like and subscribe for more stories of truth, revenge, and finding strength where they least expect it.